Why is it that people are so fascinated by tragedy? Is it simply a morbid sense of intrigue, or instead, is it a preserving sense of self-insertion, knowing that you could be just a few miles, a few years, or a few unlucky moves away from experiencing the disaster yourself, but this time you got lucky? The same questions could be asked, and the answers applied, to the intrigue around abandoned buildings. As you see the largely crude graffiti, the fading signage which once bore bright, recognisable logos, and the slumping structures caving in under their own rotting weight, or destroyed through no fault of their own, you can't help but wonder, how did something once so full of life become so empty? Regardless of the size or the severity, abandoned buildings and structures serve as grim reminders of what once was, and the associated tragedies. And this could not be truer for one of the most iconic abandoned theme parks to ever exist, Six Flags New Orleans, which has been littered since its closure with the skeletal frames of coasters that once evoked laughter, but now sit in a still, eerie silence. How could a space built on the promise of economic and social development, once driven by the dream of showcasing a community's rich, vibrant history, end up ravaged and devastated just 5 years after opening? And how, 2 decades later, is a community so deeply hurt by tragedy investing in itself to rewrite its future? Let's find out. Hi, I'm Jo, and I like to talk about theme park history amongst many other things. From abandoned attractions to horror houses, I cover plenty of topics in the tourism, entertainment sphere and beyond, so if that's the kind of thing you're interested in, be sure to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on any of my upcoming videos. Now, without further ado, here is a story riddled with grief and tragedy, but also hope. So let's begin with the origins of Jazzland, New Orleans' newest and last theme park. When it was announced that the construction of a new theme park would begin in New Orleans, it had been 15 years since the city's last amusement park, Pontchartrain Beach, had closed. A consequence of decreasing attendance and rising costs, the amusement park was littered with controversy throughout its life, including long-standing segregation and a number of unsighted fatal accidents and urban legends. But with the opening of this new theme park, things were set to be different. From its inception, the Jazzland project aimed to serve the community, with employee outreach coordinated for local schools, community centres and churches to source a local workforce, plus hospitality programmes intended to be coordinated with local community colleges and universities down the line. Guidelines were also put in place to ensure hiring from some of the poorest areas of the city occurred, and there was an emphasis on participation from women and minority-owned businesses in the construction process. Many hoped that the park would also help to reshape the local tourism economy and redefine New Orleans as a family destination, rather than an adult-centred city, serving alongside the likes of local attractions like the Aquarium of the Americas and Audubon Zoo. Before it had even come into fruition, there was a lot riding on the park's success, and unlike many projects, people actively wanted it to thrive. Work began on the $130 million site in late December 1998, with a workforce of approximately 300 working 6 days a week for almost 10 hours a day. The project progressed rapidly, and within less than a year and a half, the park was ready to open. Later, reports would emerge of contractors complaining that they had not been paid, perhaps an early indication of financial concerns which would arise down the line. While we're still on the topic of construction, an interesting thing to note is that the park was built on a 4-foot raised platform. As New Orleans is below sea level, roadways, walkways, rides and buildings were all set to be elevated, and natural flood defence vegetation left alone wherever possible. This may seem irrelevant now, but will be very important later. By 2000, the new theme park was ready to go. Jazzland was the product of the hard work of 2 New Orleans locals, the Winninger brothers. Acknowledging that their experience was in industrial engineering and real estate, the pair partnered with Ogden Entertainment to work on the project, but finding a reliable professional partner would prove hard work for the park, with the original concept pitched to partners who had later dropped out, and a day prior to opening, Ogden Entertainment had sold its theme park division to a holding company in Greece. But despite this, after having spent almost a decade planning and lining up financing for the park, it finally opened on May 20th, 2000 in New Orleans, Louisiana. In the end, it was a long journey full of near misses and failed deals with big-name entertainment companies, so the pair were very relieved to see the project finally come into fruition. The park was located near the intersection of 2 major interstates, and sat on 140 acres of the 220 acres that the Winninger brothers owned. To break it down, the park would span 50 acres, and offer 90 acres of parking spaces across 3 parking lots. Additionally, another 88 acres of land was set aside in anticipation of future expansions, featuring rides and attractions, and even potentially a water park. At the time of opening, Jazzland was the largest theme park between Atlanta and Houston, whose biggest park, the now defunct Astroworld, was a cool 350 miles away, indicating a clear gap in the market for local, big-scale entertainment. There had been a few notable theme parks which operated in New Orleans in the 20th century, including Pontchartrain Beach, but you can barely count the number of amusement parks that have operated in Louisiana in the 21st century on two hands. While the nearby still functioning Dixieland amusement park operated with a number of smaller family rides, there had never been a park comparable to Jazzland in the state, so it really was a groundbreaking entertainment offering. On the park map, you'd find not only fonts reminiscent of SpongeBob and Build-A-Bear, but the land lineup, which consisted of Cajun Country, Jazz Plaza, Good Time Gardens, Kids Carnival, and Mardi Gras. Mardi Gras was home to the designated premier coaster of the park, the Mega Zeph, a 4,000-foot-long steel-structured wood track coaster with a 110-foot lift hill and top speeds of 65 miles per hour. The new park paid special homage to local history and culture, with an entire section honouring the aforementioned Pontchartrain Beach that had closed 2 decades prior. This area, which overlooked the Jazz Lake body of water, took inspiration from the seaside whimsy of the previous attraction. It was reported that Mega Zeph was originally intended to be a replica of Pontchartrain Beach's The Zephyr, but the coaster was deemed too small for the new thrill-filled Jazzland. Other attractions included a free-fall swing ride, a boat ride, a Ferris wheel, a boomerang coaster, and a log flume. The park also offered arcades, shops, a festival hall, a playground, rest areas, and remote-controlled boats. Restaurants served up a variety of traditional festival fare like hot dogs, hamburgers and funnel cakes, whilst also serving up food intended to be reflective of Louisianan cuisine, like gumbo, crawfish and beignets. Following a grand opening ceremony complete with Air Force planes and messenger pigeons, the park triumphantly opened and welcomed over 1 million guests in its first year, having sold between 75 and 80,000 season passes by opening day alone. This success was short-lived, however, with attendance dipping to almost half of that in the following season, with between only 560 and 580,000 guests visiting in 2001. This was attributed to a number of factors, including a lack of offerings to help combat the sweltering summer heat, such as shaded areas. Additionally, some guests complained that there just wasn't enough to do at Jazzland, stating that you could do everything in 2 hours. And it just got worse from there. In February 2002, the park's owners, now Alpha Smart Parks, filed for federal bankruptcy reorganisation, and the park was in danger of closing without the support of third parties, so they started looking for someone else to step in, but it wasn't easy. In a 2002 article, the city's mayor, Mark Morial, said that he'd grown weary of dealing with management groups and was instead looking for a substantial entertainment group like Six Flags to take over instead. While in the same article Six Flags declined to comment, Mayor Morial's dreams would come true as within a year, the bankrupt Jazzland had a new owner. While other operators including WAC International and Ripley Entertainment of Ripley's Believe It or Not museums had expressed interest, it would be the initially distant Six Flags Incorporated, who at the time operated 38 parks in North America and Europe, who would answer the call. As if spoken into existence, on August 23, 2002, they purchased the park for $22 million, with the New Orleans City Council issuing a 75-year lease for the land and attractions whilst they maintained control of the site, providing Six Flags with an option to buy it after 2017. Many theme park fans were apprehensive of the takeover, afraid that it would take some of the soul out of the park, but others were excited about the addition of brand new coasters and character integration, which were hallmarks of the Six Flags brand at the time. It's reported that Six Flags had originally been a contender for Jazzland prior to its opening, having almost signed a deal with the winning De Brothers before it fell through, but this time it was the real deal. Six Flags shared that over the next 3 seasons, Jazzland would officially be renamed to Six Flags New Orleans, and the company would invest at least $25 million into park improvements, including $20 million for a major attraction, a water section, a children's area, and extra shade in the addition of air conditioning, which would hopefully offer some respite to the sweltering summers. As part of the rebrand, they would also rename some of the existing attractions and adopt the broader company slogan of It's Playtime. Under the control of Six Flags, the park would receive a new DC superheroes area, plus some broader IP integration into other attractions, with Kids Carnival becoming Looney Tunes Adventure. The new DC area included 4 attractions that had been moved over from the defunct Thrill Valley in Japan: Batman the Ride, an inverted B&M coaster; Catwoman's Whip, an electric-shaped flat ride from Mondial; Joker's Jukebox, a Schwarzkopf polyp complete with custom cars; and Lex Luthor's Invertitron, a wind shear from Zamperla. The park also received one final import, the Jester, a steel Vekoma coaster from Six Flags Fiesta Texas, which landed in the Mardi Gras area of the park. However, despite these additions and investments, the park still wasn't performing as well as hoped, and by the end of the 2004 season, reports indicated that neither visitor numbers nor economic return were as anticipated. The Six Flags company would later go on to state that the marketplace never embraced the park. It was suggested that guests would feel more inclined to visit their local park than commute to this one in New Orleans, and that the 3.1 million people within 100 miles of the park wouldn't be enough to generate the desired revenue or footfall. And this would be demonstrated by economic declines, with annual revenue dropping by $10 million between 2003 and 2005, at which point the season would unexpectedly come to an end. Just a heads up that in this section, I'll not only be discussing the effects of Hurricane Katrina on the park, but also some of the social effects, including displacement and death. If this is something you'd feel more comfortable skipping over, that is totally fine. Just see the timestamps in the description and you can go to the next section instead, where we'll be exploring the post-storm life of the park. When the park closed on Sunday the 21st of August 2005 as part of standard limited operations during school term time, staff members and visitors alike assumed that the park would be open as normal by the next weekend. However, after a tropical depression made landfall in Florida on August 25th and was then forecast to hit New Orleans directly on the 26th, the park updated its signage to read "Closed for Storm." This iconic image has long served as a tragic reminder of humanity's vulnerability to nature. When the storm, now dubbed Hurricane Katrina, hit New Orleans, the results were catastrophic and unprecedented, with the city and surrounding areas sustaining serious damage not only from the storm itself, but the secondary effects. Previously in 2001, FEMA had identified that one of the most probable catastrophes that the United States could face was a hurricane and levee break in New Orleans. There are plenty of resources outlining the contributing failures that I'd recommend reading, but for the purpose of this video, I'll summarise that many of the potential precautions were not taken, or if they were, they ultimately failed. As a result of this, it was suggested in a report published by the Louisiana Department of Health that Katrina was directly responsible for the deaths of up to 1,200 people, many of which were likely preventable, and over 1 million people were displaced. Despite being built on a 4-foot platform, Six Flags New Orleans didn't stand a chance against the storm surge, as the drainage pumps quickly failed. Much like 80% of New Orleans, it was submerged and reportedly faced between 6 to 8 feet of salt water, which would remain in place for over a month. Shortly after the hurricane, Six Flags New Orleans announced that the park would remain closed through the 2006 season, while it assessed the full extent of the damage and the size of its eventual insurance recoveries. Following this, their website was quietly updated to announce a closure for the 2007 season, and the announcement of an indefinite closure followed. In their 2008 annual report, Six Flags stated that the carrying value of destroyed assets was approximately $34 million, and in the second quarter of 2008, announced that they did not intend to operate a theme park on the site and would officially abandon it. Over the next few years, a reportedly long and costly battle between the city of New Orleans and Six Flags would ensue, with Six Flags setting out to terminate the 75-year lease which had been established less than 3 years earlier, including with one offer of $14 million to release them from the contract. In 2009, the contract cancellation was allowed, and the Industrial Development Board agreed to take the title for the park while the city considered other development opportunities. The theme park would never open again. Home to stagnant water and alligators, among other critters, Six Flags New Orleans would stand closed for almost 20 years, but during this time frame, it still had plenty of visitors. The now abandoned park quickly gained an almost cult-like status amongst theme park lovers and urban explorers alike. Its eerie quietness, gradual decay, and the slow natural reclamation boldly contradicted everything that visitors less than a year before had come to expect from the theme park. While some attractions would be salvaged and moved to other parks around the country, Six Flags New Orleans was largely left as was. As time went on, the park somehow transcended abandonment and became something of a legend. Horror stories, both fictitious and factual, littered the internet, forums about the best ways to enter the property and reports of trespassing tickets were easy to come by, and business journals openly discussed the lack of security on site. While it was reported that a barbed wire fence was added in 2008, the periodic patrols and desecrated barriers were weak deterrents to bold adventure seekers, who were eager to experience the sun-faded ghost town firsthand. Shockingly, despite the fates faced by other abandoned attractions, I struggled to find any reports on fires or other incidents that had occurred at this property since its closure. In the decades following its closure, the park became better known for its post-operating life than the time it had spent open, and I believe this non-operating period of its existence is what really shaped its legacy. A park which once set out to honour and aid its community now operated not as a tourism booster, but rather as a painful reminder of the thing which hurt it so deeply. The remnants of Six Flags was described by many as not only an eyesore, but a painful daily reminder of the tragedy that the city of New Orleans had faced. In the foreground of all of this, there was a lot happening. Development deals were being unsuccessfully considered, leases were terminated, requests for proposals were released and subsequent proposals were withdrawn, and blockbuster films including Percy Jackson's Sea of Monsters and Jurassic World were being produced on site. All the while deals were drawn and deals were ditched, the park stood still, empty and frozen in time. Proposals for the site included a withdrawn Southern Star Amusement / Nickelodeon water park, plans for hotels and sport complexes, concert venues, and even an entire reopening of Jazzland as an amusement park. It's reported that many unsolicited concepts had also been put forward, but none stuck, instead likely dismissed due to being deemed too expensive. And that was the case until October 2021, when the Bayou Phoenix company entered the scene and were selected as the developer for the site. Although talks had been occurring and rumours swirling following the acquisition of the property title by the New Orleans Redevelopment Authority in 2023, there will be no clear indication of the park's future until the following year when, in August of 2024, a bright, optimistic vision presented by the Bayou Phoenix team for a new future of Six Flags New Orleans was finally announced. Their conceptual master plan considered a number of feasibility studies and trends, even describing some of the plan's proposed elements as only comparable to Walt Disney World. In this plan, the abandoned park was to be torn down in favour of a new development, once again featuring hotels, a family entertainment centre, an indoor water park, indoor and outdoor sports facilities, retail and dining outlets, and a movie studio. The project costs were estimated in 2023 to be between $500 million and $1 billion, with the city, state and federal sources contributing $100 million, and the remaining balance provided by private investors and loans. For many, this plan signals not only a move away from tragedy for local residents and the wider community, but a move towards an opportunity, with unprecedented entertainment and sports training facilities too. As of 2023, the project's projected grand total economic impact comfortably hit over $4 billion and offered the creation of thousands of jobs. While this is likely a very generous estimate, the development appears to undeniably offer huge benefits for the city of New Orleans. In late 2024, the demolition process began in preparation for the new development. And that brings us nicely up to the present day, almost 20 years on from the park's anticipated short-term closure. However, before its untimely end, a passionate group of archivists were brought on site to preserve the memory of one of the most notable monuments of the city's tragedy. With first-hand experience in abandoned photography at this specific location, Jason Lanier has been documenting the remnants and demolition of the park for years, and is now doing it on company time, having been appointed the official photographer for E. Ross Studios' Jazzland project. 12 years after being issued a trespassing ticket during his own urban exploration, this exceptionally talented photographer released a short documentary detailing his experience and work so far. His passion for documentation reflects the passion of many, and in my opinion, it's beautiful to see someone brought in professionally as part of an archival project, to preserve the memory and downfall of something so iconic. Shortly after demolition began, however, the process was halted, with a stop order being issued on November 7th regarding improper licensing. Reportedly, the contractor hired for the project lacked their license for rigging and dismantling, obviously a crucial part of the process. The contract was then terminated, and talks for a new licensed contractor began shortly after. The demolition has also been muddied by a combination of public and private interpersonal and professional disputes, including debates over the rights to proceeds from the sale of scrap metal. While it's unclear when the demolition will resume, all rides and buildings are set to be torn down by the end of January 2025, with someone receiving payment for their scrappage, and water spaces filled in. In the meantime, however, some structures have already been removed, including one of the park's iconic attractions, the double corkscrew backwards coaster known as the Jester. If we were being poetic about the affair, I'm sure we could say somehow that Six Flags New Orleans has survived yet another disaster, but one way or another, it certainly looks like the park will finally be laid to rest. Though thankfully, due to a team of equally passionate people, this may not be the end of Jazzland. Combining Jason's photography and physical remnants, Elvin Ross of E-Ross Studios hopes to open up an immersive experience museum honouring the park, complete with beautiful artwork, rescued merchandise, and restored park vehicles. Ross is also due to open up an inclusive technology and entertainment hub on the site, which will function as the leading motion and television studio, thus providing more creative opportunities to a community that was disrupted in so many ways. From start to finish, beginning to end, the story of Jazzland has been tinged with hope. From the inception of the original park to its purchase and subsequent closure, decades of decline and the new developments currently underway, someone has always hoped for greatness for this park, and it feels fitting that it's finally received its hard-earned ending, even if it didn't manifest in the way that many had hoped. And with that, our story comes to a close. Thank you so much for watching this video, and if you enjoyed it, feel free to give it a like and subscribe to my channel, and check out the links in the description below to support me on alternative platforms. If you enjoyed this video, you may also enjoy some of my other videos, exploring the history and origins of theme parks and tourism products elsewhere in the world. To conclude, I'll leave you with Jason Lanier's motivational message to never give up on your dreams, but wherever possible, do your best to stay on the right side of the law. Have a lovely day, and I'll see you real soon.